Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're back in the sewing room because I have just finished making another dish mat. Only this dish mat is for the month of March. So if you want to see what design I've come up with and you want to see how I make it, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, if you've been following my channel for at least a month, you probably have seen the video where I made this dish mat. And this dish mat is a Valentine dish mat, and I designed two of them that I made on the tutorial that was videotaped. And this one seemed to be really well liked. In fact, I think my views are almost at 100,000 for this video alone. And that makes me so happy that you guys really liked this. And I'm so glad that I could inspire you to want to sew again, because I've had lots of people saying, I want to sew again, or that you wanted to make this. And so many of you were making them for gifts and things like that. And I think that is just so wonderful. And I just want to say thank you so much for reaching out and commenting when you didn't have to. You could have just made the pattern and gone on, but to comment, to let me know how much you liked it, that meant so much to me. And I really appreciate you guys. You guys are why I'm doing this, and I hope that you continue watching, and I hope to continue making things and sharing them with you. So since you guys like this one so well, when I was getting ready to make my next video, I thought, well, maybe I should just start making them for the months, because that would be fun. So I thought maybe we'd try that, and let me know what you think. So I went ahead, and as I was designing this one, I just videotaped it so that you could see how I made it. And it's very, very easy. And this one is for March. And you can see I have the shamrocks, and then I have strips. This is all quilt as you go. If you can stitch a straight stitch, you can make this. It's really very easy. And I hope that you will like this one as much as I do. Somebody asked in my last video if I choose my mats based on the back color. And as you can see, no. And I don't care that it's pink, because I never see it when it's laying on next to my sink. I never see it when it's on the island with jars or a pan on it. It doesn't get seen, so I don't care. In fact, I like that terry cloth backing. It hides those stitches so well. You can't even tell what color thread I used, and I used white. So I don't worry about the back. If you worry about the back and you don't like the pink, you want to use a fabric, cover it with fabric, sew it like you do a quilt. And I've done that before, but after making so many of them, I just decided, no, I don't like that, because it get these little pleats of fabric that kind of mess up, and I don't want to bother with it. And I really like the terry cloth, so I don't worry about it. I had other people who said they could do the same thing, but they just used old towels, which is a great idea. I would say you'd probably want to use about 2 layers of towels, and then you can put your fabric on top. But that's a great idea, so you don't even have to buy a mat. Everybody was asking, where are you getting your mats? Because, you know, they're not expensive, but apparently the price has gone up in some places. I know Walmart is probably not the place to go right now, because they never have a sale on theirs, and those are more expensive. But I have found I have been getting a lot at Hobby Lobby lately. And in their spring shop, and that's the label, spring shop, they have 40% off, and they'll probably be running 40% off through the whole spring. They are each regularly $3.29, but with 40% off, they're just $1.97. And I find that these are a really good weight. They're not too thick, they're not too thin. They don't have a big binding on them, so I don't have to worry about cutting it off or getting it bulky underneath my binding. And these work perfect. So in this video, we are going to be making this Shamrock dish mat for March. Again, I hope that you like it as well as you liked the Valentine one. I know the Valentine was really cute, but this one is really fun and it's so springy. I love the bright colors. So if you want to make this, continue watching, and I hope you enjoy this video. For my dish mat, what I've used is some Lori Holt 2.5-inch strips, which are jelly roll strips. And all I've done here is just go in and take out all the colors that I think would look good, the greens, and then some of these are a little bit more on the blue side, but I think that gives a nice contrast. Some of them are a little more lime color, but I like the variation, and that'll give it a little more pop. This is from 2 different lines. I think one is Mercantile, and the other one, I believe, is Flea Market. So, yeah, Flea Market is on that edge right there. So, like I said, I just went in and picked out all the greens that I thought would look good. We are not going to use all of these, but I just wanted to get the ones that I can choose from. So, after I get the ones that I choose from, I am going to choose which fabrics I want to use for my clover or my shamrocks. And I selected this one and this one and this one. Now, you can have a scrappy shamrock that has each leaf a different color, or you can do each shamrock in one fabric. I'm going to use 3 different fabrics, but I'm going to have each one the same fabric. And it doesn't matter how you do this. I just thought that this might give our eyes a little bit of a rest because we're going to have so many stripes and so much color in this one that just a little bit of solid color, and there's going to be white around it, will give our eyes just a little bit of a place to rest, and it will also make these shamrocks pop out. You're also going to need a little bit of white yardage. A fat quarter would be plenty. The one thing you need to do is make sure you have enough of the white to go across the width of your drying mat, your dish mat. And we're going to be having a thin strip here and a thin strip here, and then we're going to have some little, I don't know if they're 4 inches or 4.5 inches long in the middle. And so just make sure you have the length. All I did was take the 3 that I liked. You can see I've already cut from them. And I trimmed off the pieces that I need for each square and this strip right here. So I believe there were 3 2.5-inch squares and then a 4-inch by 1-inch piece for the stem, and the same here. And so here are your cuts. For each shamrock, this is what you're going to need. I've got 3 shamrocks, so I've got this in 3 colorways. I am keeping the white the same throughout. So if you need to take a screenshot of that so that you'll have that, go right ahead. All right, so I'm going to set this aside for right now. Now, if you've been making any of my other quilts lately with the hearts, you're probably getting really, really good at these stitch and flip corners because we've been doing that on the hearts. So we're going to be doing the same thing on our Shamrock block. So we're going to take these 3 blocks right here, and on 3 of the corners, we are going to put right sides together 3 of these 1-inch squares. And again, this is tone on tone, which is a white on a white. And I've got to look carefully at it to make sure I'm getting it the right side down, because we're putting right sides together. And it doesn't matter which corner you use, they're all going to end up, you can get those in the same position no matter how you turn it. Okay, so we have our 3 squares and we have our corner blocks on them. And now what you're going to do, if you need to, is draw your lines, and I'll draw it on one in case you're new to this. And I'm going to use a friction pin, which is one that will disappear in heat. If you don't have a friction pin, use something very lightly so that it doesn't go through to the fabric that you're going to be keeping on your dish mat. It's right on the seam line, and if it's too dark, you might see it in that seam line, especially since this is white. So I'm going to go from corner to corner here, and if you look at this block, if we are doing this block, let's see, let me turn it. Let's just do this block right here. I think I've got it in the camera, don't I? So we're doing this angle. We're doing this angle and this angle here. So we're just, and this is also called snowballing our corners, stitch and flip and snowballing. Now, if you're new, you can pin this. These are very small, so sometimes our pins can distort them. So another thing you can do, if you'd like, is take either the liquid school glue. I like the glue sticks, they dry real quickly. And you have to have the school glue, the Elmer's washable. And you can put on just the corners, because this is going to not be, this is just going to be cut off in the end. You can put on the very corners of each of these green blocks just a dab of that glue, and that will hold it in place. This is for people that are still getting used to sewing straight stitches, still getting used to snowballing. This is a good help. Just make sure that you have your edges of your white blocks matching those edges of the green block. This is really small, and so just being a little bit off can make your block wonky. So just be careful. Now, I'll do this one like this, but these other 2, I have my seam tape, and I think I've shared that with you in my last video. Let me grab it again in case you didn't see that video. This seam tape is very handy, especially if you're doing a lot of diagonal, sewing across a diagonal on blocks. You just take a piece off and set it right here on the plate of your sewing machine. And I have a piece here right up close. And then if I have a long piece, it extends out, making sure that you match it up with your feed dogs and everything is straight. And then when you feed your fabric in, like if I were doing this one, okay, I think we can see here, I've got it set up. Again, you can see on my plate here, my tape is taped, and the lines, these black lines, are lined up with my feed dogs here. And this is right in the center where my needle is, right there. So make sure that your needle is adjusted for the center, and that's where we're going to be sewing. So when you do a diagonal line like this, we put the needle right here. Whoops, it's kind of hard with the camera right here. I think I can see it. Okay, we put our needle right there, and then we're just going to run along here, and this should be lined up with this red line. And as it sews, we just keep it lined up. So let's start it up and see. And there you have it, lots of threads. There you have it, it followed right through. So if you don't have any lines, and I'm just going to take one that doesn't have any lines, and it doesn't have any glue. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to put the corner right there where my needle is. Then I'm going to put this corner right here. Then I'm going to let that go like that. And if you're doing the small pieces like this, it's really nice to have a stiletto. This is a clover stiletto. It's very handy. That way you don't get your fingers under the needle. I know some people that have done that, and that is not any fun at all. So there we have from corner to corner without having any lines. So that's something to work toward. First of all, you want to make sure that you are able to keep the fabric on your block in the right place. So gluing it, that's fine. And if you need to draw the lines, that's fine. But this seam tape is really handy. It's by the pattern company QUILT-AS-YOU-GO-DISH, and I think there's a lot of others out there now too. Lori Holt has a piece that you lay under your presser foot here, and it's fairly large, and it's got a seam guide. Eleanor, what's her name? Quilt in a Day, Eleanor Burns. She has a plate too that goes, or it's a piece of plastic that goes underneath, and you can sew different angles and stuff without drawing lines. So all of those are nice. So if you're new to sewing, those are some things that you might keep in mind that might help you. These are really easy to chain stitch. Since you're going to be doing 9 of these all together, I would probably go ahead and have all of my fabrics, the other 3 fabrics too, and have all the corners ready. And I would just start off, trim off my thread here. And I would just start off by doing 1, then lifting my foot down, another one, and since we already did that one, I don't need to turn another angle. We've got the one on here. I had taken these off a while ago, so let me put them back on, and I'll straighten them up as I go. So I'll put it here. So then I can just take this one over here, and I can go there, lift my feet. I've got that lined up right there, and I can just keep going and not cut strings until the very end, and then I'll have all of my corners all snowballed, and it will be really easy and quick that way. So this is called chain sewing, and it makes it go so much faster. So I'll bring you back when I have this set all finished and the threads cut. And I'm just finishing up the last cutting. Because we didn't cut the thread, I have to make sure I cut it between each of those squares and get that trimmed up. All right, so we have all of these all finished. So now what we need to do is we need to flip back. We've stitched and now we flip back and see that these have covered that back triangle completely. And if they haven't, you might need to remove it and do it again. If it's gone over, it's okay. But as long as it's covered it, you're good. I am just going to trim off the corner to 1/4 inch, and this is why we put the glue there. We are just cutting it off 1/4 inch away from that seam, just like that. I am going to press these. Now I'm going to press 2 of them like this, where the background or the clover fabric is toward the light, toward those corners. And then 1 of them I'm going to do the opposite. I am going to press the seam toward the clover like this. Okay, because that way we can nest seams when we put them together. Now you could do 2 of them like this and 1 of them like the other way, but 2 of them have to be the same way. 1 of them has to be the opposite. So I'll bring you back when we get this ready. And we have all of our snowballed leaves ready. So they're going to go like this. You can have the stem going here, and it will be the same thing if you turn it like this. So that stem can be on any area. We'll just leave it like this for placement, because when you turn the block, it moves. Okay, now we need the stem, and we need this triangle right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut right across the diagonal on this one. Let me move these out of the way. So I'm going to match it from corner to corner, right here, corner to corner. And I am going to cut. And then, whoops, just got a little tiny thread there. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we are going to take and we are going to place right sides together this triangle and this rectangle together. And I'm going to flip it over on this side so you can see. Now the little triangles on the ends will stick out just a little bit. Just make sure you have both about the same size. We're going to sew 1/4 inch away. Okay, we're going to flip it back. Do a little finger press there. Now we're going to take the other one with right sides together. We're going to do the same thing, only on the other edge of the rectangle. We're going to put the edges together, and we're going to make sure the same amount is sticking out on both ends. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's just something to make sure you've got it all in there right. Then we're going to sew 1/4 inch away from the edge. And there we have the stem. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press it. You can either press it open like this, or you can press it towards the green. I'm going to go ahead and press mine towards the green because there's enough room in there to hold both seams. They just butt up against each other, and that way you won't see them through the white fabric. You won't see that seam allowance. So I'm going to press it and I'll bring you back. And there we have this so far. Now it's not 2.5 inches, and we need it to be 2.5 inches. We've oversized it so that we can trim it down. Also, I want to say, when you are pressing, if you are new to sewing, you need to make sure you don't have any little pleats in these seams. That will mess you up, and after a while you might say, oh my goodness, I have a big old bump right there because I did not get that seam pressed correctly. So really be careful when you're pressing, making sure you don't have any little layers. And when I say a pleat in the seam, it's when you press it and it's like that, and you don't notice it until later, and you stretch it out and there's a big old piece sticking out there. So I know that was one of the things when I was younger and starting to sew that I would not be aware of a lot, and I was always trying to go too fast and then my finished block might not be as nice as I would have liked. So just a little thing to look for. Now we're going to cut this down to 2.5 inches. And I am just going to take, you can take a square ruler or you can take a ruler that is wider than 3 inches. And that's what I have right here. And I am just going to put, and it should have a diagonal line. Here's my 1 and here's my 1. It goes from 1 to 3 here. It goes from 1 to 6 here. This corner right here is the corner that I'm going to put in the top here. And this diagonal line should go right into the center of this stem. Just like this. Now I see right now my block is 3 inches still. Okay. Now I am going to slide it because we only need 2.5. And here's the 2.5 line right here. So we don't need that much. But I'm going to trim both ends because I like to have both sides nice. So I'm just going to move it a little bit right here. And then down here it needs to be at the 2.5 inch here. So I'm going to move it a little bit here. I still have some room because I'm going to trim these sides and then I'm going to turn it over and trim these just to make them nice and square. So I've got this line right here going right down the middle. And I've got these lines, I think they're both on, like this one's on the 2 3/4 line, and this one's on the 2 5/8 line, which is fine. But they're straight, they're not wonky. And we're going to trim there and there. That's our throwaway. Then we're going to take the corner that we had at the zeros, and we're going to turn it all the way to the bottom left side. And we're going to put our ruler on again. Now this time we can mark it at 2.5 and at 2.5. And this is the one you want to make sure it's all lined up nicely. So this line is right down the middle, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. And then you're going to get a nice square block. Okay. So there's our block for our stem. So this is going to go right here, and we needed it to be 2.5 inches because these are 2.5 inches too. Now I'm going to show you something because you might have a block that looks like this, and it's okay. It's bigger than what you need it to be. If it were smaller, if this corner were smaller, it would not be okay. But we can trim this off. So you could, if you wanted to, if it's going to cause you to have a few problems, square up these blocks. These Shamrock blocks are pretty forgiving when you put them together, but we can square them up. And I'm just going to take that little edge off. I'm just lining it up with that leaf right there. And then I'm going to turn it here, and now I've got a nice straight line here, and I'm going to line it up there. This should be at 2.5 right here, and there's just a little bit right there. And then I can keep going, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, because I don't want it smaller than 2.5. That would be a problem. And then this can come off. It's just the white that I'm taking off because it's okay to have those white triangles going further out, but you want to make sure they go further out. And there I have a nice straight block. Now, if you wanted to do all of yours and square them up, you can. I'm going to be just fine, so I'm not going to mess with it right now. Now, a while ago, I told you to press one block differently. And so here's the one that's different. This is going to be your middle block right here, your middle leaf, I should say. So we're going to put these two together first, and we're going to do it this way. I'm going to just use this as a sample. We're going to put these two together first. And I am going to put right there. You can see that piece right there sticking out, but I am eyeballing it and measuring with this green fabric here. This right here is nesting because one seam goes this direction right here. One seam goes this direction, and when they butt up against each other, those seams are right on top of each other. And that's exactly what we want, because we want this point right here to meet, and we want to have good points. when you're new, your points might not be perfect, and it's okay. Especially with this project, this is just a dish mat. These are wonderful to work on because these are not going to be things you're going to be passing down for generations. They are not going to be heirloom pieces, but they are great to practice. Okay, we've got that. I'm going to press this one open. And right now I'm just going to finger press it. Okay, whoops, this one went like that. Okay, so now we've got that. Now we need these two blocks right here sewn together, and you need to make sure that all of the unsnowballed corners or the non-snowballed corners are in the center. So we've got it like this. We're going to be putting these two right sides together, and there is no seams to match up on this one, so we'll just sew it 1/4 inch away. And again, we will finger press, open. Sometimes if you just use your fingernail a little bit, it'll get it down there nicely. Okay, now we've got this. Now we can put right sides together. So these two seams do match up right here in the middle, and they're both pressed open. So all we need to do is make sure they're right on top of each other. And I do like to pin when I'm matching up seams. And then over here, remember we had this one going toward the green, this one going toward the white. Now they are nicely nesting, and we can put a pin right there. Okay, so line up these edges nicely. I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch away from this top edge. And there we have our shamrock block. Now we can go ahead and square this up if we want to have it nice and square. If you have a 4.5 inch square ruler, you just lay it on. Make sure your corners are going from corner to corner. Check and see if your seam in the middle is lined up, and then just trim around. Not everybody has that, so you can take another ruler as long as it's wider than what you're working with. Put the ones up here. We're going to put this corner right here, down here, this corner right here, and make sure that our stem has that dark line going right through it. And it's going to be a 4.5 inch block. Whoops. So I'm going to still trim a little bit off over here. So we'll trim off just a little bit there. And then I could have done the top, but I wanted to get this over here because I saw that I had it pleated. See how I have it pleated right here? If I pull on it, it pops open. I'm going to press that a little better because that was pleated. Now it's better. Now you can see it's better. So let's see, we got this edge right here, so I'm going to just put that at the bottom, and now that can go on the 4.5 inch line. And I don't want to take off the green because I'm pretty sure my green is good, but I do want to take off some of those little white pieces because those little triangles can be kind of sticking out there. And again, I could be doing it up here too, but I can't see with the camera right there, so I'm just turning it and just doing from this one side. And again, that was just white. And then 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. And we still have it angle to angle. And there we go. We have our block all squared up. So here's one block. I'm going to make the other two blocks, and then I'm going to bring you back and we're going to start putting them on our drying mat. And my shamrock blocks are completed. They're pressed. They are trimmed. They are ready to go. They are 4.5 by 4.5 inch blocks. So they are in good shape. I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to show you. First of all, let's take a look at what we're using for our dish mat again. This dish mat is 14 by 21, but yours can be any size. If you have one that's smaller, you might want to change some of the strips that we're using, use fewer, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So this is my idea for our dish mat. I thought we would put the shamrocks right here in the middle. I'm going to have white strips on each side of them and then a white border up here and here because I think that will frame them up nicely. You know, you could have added a white border all around these and then have, you know, this fabric be this stripe. It's up to you. This is easier, so this is what I'm going to go with. But I think the white being around the shamrocks help it pop out a little bit. Otherwise, these little corners kind of get lost. So what it looks like I have here, and these are going to be 1 1/4 inch strips. So it's half the thickness of a jelly roll. So we're just going to take our jelly rolls, the colors that we want, cut them in half lengthwise. So we would just cut this all the way up like that, and that way we'd have our strip that is 1 1/4 inches wide. Once we sew 1/4 inch on both sides, it's going to end up being a 3/4 inch strip, which will be pretty narrow, and that's okay. We don't mind. It'll have more color too. Like I said, you don't need many jelly roll strips for this. It will be very few. But I think I want mine to be pretty scrappy, so I'm going to choose a little assortment. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick out the ones that I want. I am going to split my jelly rolls that I'm using directly in half. And then I'm going to also get my white strips. And I'm going to choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colored strips that are going to be 4 1/2 inches tall. But they're still going to be 1 1/2. So it's going to be leftovers from some of my strips. And then I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 white strips that are 4 1/2 inches by 1 1/2 inch. No, by 1 1/4 inches. And so these would be the length or the width of your mat that you're sewing. Mine is 21, so I'm going to cut mine to be 21. Actually, I'll cut them a little longer so I have a little wiggle room. And if I mess up, I can just trim off the excess. But they all need to be 1 1/4 inches thick. So I am going to go pick out my fabrics. When I get them all picked out and ready to sew together, I'll bring you back. All right, so I've got some pieces cut out and I've just kind of been lying them on here. So what I have figured out is I took 4 strips, cut them in half, and I'm using the same fabrics on both sides. Now, as far as right now, I have them laid out in the same pattern, but I may switch that up. I don't know. Make it real scrappy and move them around. Then I also have a white strip here that's just laying in here for both the top and the bottom of the shamrocks. And then I've cut some strips for the diagonal or the vertical pieces between the shamrocks. Now, you don't have to have 1 1/4 inch strips. You can use whatever size thickness you want. I thought having smaller ones, since we just have a little bit of space here, would give more fabrics a chance to be in this. But you can use different sizes and mix and match like we did on the heart one that we did earlier. So this is really easy to change up the way you like it. Don't feel like you have to do the exact same thing that I'm doing. So I did end up cutting. These are 4 1/2 inches tall, 4 1/2 inches wide too. I went ahead and overcut these to 5. These strips I just ended up doing in half. They're 42, 43 inch pieces. I just cut them in half so there's just a little hangover, which is fine. We're going to trim all this up when we're done. I'd rather have hangover than not enough fabric. So I've overcut most of my pieces, basically. We are going to be doing the quilt-as-you-go method for the whole thing. So I'm going to take these strips off real carefully. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to go, and my ruler's just about not long enough, but it's going to be fine. I am going to try to get a center on this. So my center, I think is right here where they intersected. Let's check and see. This is 14, and so that is right on 7. So here is my center. Now I'm going to draw a line and just make sure it is, let me pull you down here. Just make sure it's square with the bottom and square with the top, so a line should be running. That way you know your line isn't slanted. And I'm going to go right down the middle, and that's where that intersection is. Now, if you're a little bit off, it's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. But if you get too far off, it gets kind of exaggerated as you add more pieces. So I'm just going to take, and this is a friction pen, but if you have a pencil or something that won't bleed into your fabrics, you can use that. This is all going to be covered up. Then this should be the middle here. And again, I'm squaring it up, making sure I have a line on each edge so that I know we're not going at an angle. And I'm going to go right through the middle. Now this is just going to help us center our blocks to get us started and to keep our rows decently straight. It doesn't matter if it gets a little off. Okay. So the first block we're going to put down is a shamrock. And because this shamrock is a 4-patch block, we have a seam here and we have a seam here. And if we match up this seam to the line and this seam to the line, this seam and this seam to that line, you know that this is perfectly centered. Okay, so I'm going to just twist it a little bit till it's all centered. Everything matches, and then I'll just put a couple of, I can put them right in the middle. Okay, so we have our beginning. Now, I have my 5-inch strips right here, and let me get my pattern. Okay, as you see, we can put a white strip on both sides of this one. So we're going to start and go this way first, and then we'll go this way. So I'm going to take one of my white pieces, and I'm going to do it right sides facing. And since this is bigger, it's going to hang over a little bit, and that is just fine. In fact, you know what I'm going to do to even make this more accurate? I am going to take my strips and I'm going to iron them all in half like this. And you could even finger press it right here if you wanted to, and we'll just do that right here. And then lay them right where that line is on that line. Now we know that these are going to be going straight across. Okay, now if we want to, we can put pins in here. And we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew 1/4 inch away from this edge. Make sure you get all of this fabric in. And I'm going to do that. Now, if you notice that your fabric is kind of hanging up on the bed of your sewing machine, you can put some tissue paper underneath here and just sew right through that. And when you're all done, you can just tear it out. The tissue paper is really easy to pull. Some people use regular paper, and that's fine too. But just be careful because the regular paper is heavier, so when you are pulling it, it might stretch your stitches some or rip your stitches. Tissue paper won't do that. It's really lightweight. So I'm going to give this a try, and if I find that I need that, I will change to that. So I'm going to sew 1/4 inch away from this edge. Now, if you need to, you can make your stitch width wider, because sometimes these drag just a little bit, and if you make it wider, it will not be quite as draggy. It'll move a little quicker through your machine. Also, the sewing needle. I am using a quilting needle that I got from my Sew Sampler box a couple of months ago, and these are chrome professional grade quilting needles, and they are 90-14. If you need to use a regular quilting needle, that would be fine, but something sturdy because you are going through some fabrics. But really, this is easy to sew through. I think the biggest thing will be the drag on the bottom, and that can easily be remedied with tissue paper. So let's flip this back, and we could give it a press, but I'm just going to do a finger press since this is just a short piece. Now we're going to choose a fabric color, and it doesn't matter. Remember, we're doing this all different colors. I think I'm just going to use this one. I'm going to match up right there. Again, if you want to just match it to the one there, you can, or if you're going to be exact, you can put a fold in it right where it is in the middle. We can pin it. And you don't have to pin if you feel confident, but I'll go ahead and do this to show. Always make sure that those edges of the fabric right there are lined up. If this one's pulled out, you might miss your fabric underneath there, and then it'll pop open. Okay, and we're going to go right here. Now, as long as you keep this going in the middle, it can be, wonky a little bit, but you don't want to get too far off. It's okay that they're hanging over or they're jagged on the ends, because that's all going to get covered up when we do our strips going this way. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one. I'm going to do another colored one, and then I'm going to do a white one. Then I'll bring you back so that we can do the next shamrock, and we'll see how we're doing as far as lining up. Okay, I've gotten to the white, and I'm ready for my next shamrock. So let me put this up here so we can look. So on this pattern, I have all my stems going in one direction. You could do your stems in any direction you want. They could be going in any direction. So I don't know. You could be doing this and then maybe up here with this one. They could just be all turned different directions. So that's your decision to make. It's a hard decision. If you had them all going down, you could do it like that or like that. I don't know. I think I'm just going to do all in one direction. It's up to you. They look good anyway. So what I'm going to do is we still have our line right here. And so what I'm going to do is put the seam right on that line. And this block right here, seam, should match up with the seam. Since you don't have this line, this seam right here is still that line. So that's how you can make sure that you are still going nice and straight. So be sure it is right on the edge and all that fabric is going to be caught in the stitch. And I'll just put a pin. And there, and I'll stitch right here. This will flip out. I'll do a white one, and then I should have room for another one. I may have room for even another one after that. We'll see, but I'll go all the way to the end and then I'll bring it back. Okay, I've finished sewing all the way to the edge and it overlaps and goes out a little bit. That's perfect. We don't need it to just butt right up to the edge. We can trim what we want at the end, but it needs to go to the end. So if yours did not go to the end, and let's say it went to there, go ahead and add a piece and let it hang over. It'll get covered up with the binding, but we want it all covered. So now we're ready to go on this side. So we're going to turn our mat and we're going to do the same thing. We are going to do a white, and I'll turn this upside down. So we're going to do a white and then 2 color strips, a white, our block, and then another white, and then depending on how much room, another block at least. And I'll bring you back when that whole row is completed. All right, as you see, I've gone all the way across, and on this one, it came really close to the edge, but I went ahead and I added a piece because once we add our binding, it may be covered up, but it may be a little bit of fabric showing, and we just want to make sure it's secured. So this is the way to make sure it's secured. Just go ahead and go all the way over. And of course, if you're using different size strips, you might have put a longer one on there, but I like to kind of keep it even on both sides and have a color down here. So as you can see, we have like strips that are, it's hard to see with this busy mat, but our strips in between are kind of jagged and they're not even with this. Our Shamrock blocks are all nice and straight. If I were to put my ruler on there, they go all the way across because again, we use that seam in the middle on that straight line. Okay, so that's what we want. We want to make sure those are straight. Now, let me go ahead and show you this, where we're at. Here's what we've got. We're going to put a white strip on the top and on the bottom. Now, I think I am just going to start and work either the top or the bottom and just go all the way down. So I'm going to go ahead and put a white strip on. And I've got to make sure right sides are together. So again, this is longer than I needed it to be, and that's good because I have room to play with it. And now I need to go right on the edge of my Shamrock blocks. So I'm going to use some pins on this one just to get it in good shape. And this is a long run, so it's probably a good idea to pin some on every strip that you use, just so that it doesn't go too wonky on you. I'm keeping it I'm not stretching it, but I'm just keeping it from having any loose give to it at the top. And again, right there, we've got them all matched up nicely. And it's a little tricky to get those pins to come back up since it's thick. And then I'm going to go right here, making sure that these edges line up. And all the way over here. Okay, so you see how we're going to be sewing right over this. This is all getting covered up, so we don't care about this. Those are just going to be edges that are covered up. Make sure that it does go over both edges, and we have it lined up here. As you sew, just make sure you don't get off because you don't want to miss and not catch that fabric underneath there. And I'm ready to take a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. I'll bring you back when I've got it. Okay, so I've got that piece on, and since this is such a long strip, I am going to press this and make sure that my seams are all flat and there are no pleats in there. And then I'm going to add my next strip, and I'm just going to keep going down until I have it all covered. It may take the 4 colored strips, it may take 5. We'll just see. And I will bring you back when I've got it all the way down here, and we'll see what it looks like. I have the bottom portion finished. I ended up needing 6 colored strips down here. And this bottom one, I couldn't decide whether I just wanted to trim it and square it up or go ahead and add another strip. I went ahead and added another strip to make sure it's secured onto the end, but we'll see. It might end up, the binding may cover it up. I may end up squaring this up. It doesn't bother me that it'll be just a little bit off as far as if there's a little green poking through. That doesn't bother me. I think there's so much fabric in it that no one's even going to notice that. So I'm ready to do the top part. I'm going to start with a white strip, and then I'll do these 6 colors again. And again, I don't know if I'm going to follow this pattern. I might, just because I've been keeping everything else pretty straight, but I might just do it scrappy up here, which probably will do. That way I won't have to pay attention to what I'm doing. I also wanted to show you in the back, and in the beginning I was thinking of changing my thread color. You don't even notice, and I've got to trim some threads there. You don't even see the thread when it's quilted. I have white thread, and you can't even see it. It gets buried into that fabric. So use the white thread. That is fine. It isn't seen. All right, I will bring you back when this is all finished being quilted at the top, and we'll be ready to trim down. It's looking so good. Everything is sewn. Again, I came very close to the edge. I went ahead and just added another piece. We'll just see how that works. So what we need to do now, it's looking so nice, we need to turn it over and we need to trim off our edges. So we have all these edges that we need to trim off, and besides the little pieces of thread that are sticking on here, you cannot see the thread in here, and it has a nice design on it, so it looks nice in the back too. So let me get my rotary cutter and my ruler, and we are just going to trim off these edges. Now if you trim off the mat a little bit, no big deal. I just like to have a nice straight line. And it's looking nice. Now what I'm going to do is, since I'm using jelly roll strips, I will go ahead and use a 2.5 inch strip for binding. On smaller projects, a lot of times I'll use a 2.25 inch, sometimes a 2. But since we've got the fabric already pre-cut, I will just keep it that way. Now I will probably use a couple of strips, and it looks like one strip will do top and bottom, and so 2 strips will probably be fine. I will probably cut this into like 3 pieces. So I'll open this up and cut it into thirds, and then choose another piece and cut it into thirds, and then piece it back together so it's nice and scrappy. And then I will be putting it around. So I'll show you what my binding looks like when I have it all made up. Okay, I have my binding all pieced together, and as you can see, I just put it in all different lengths. When I cut it into 3 pieces, I tried to vary the size. Some of them are longer than others, and so none of them were the same length. And then what I did was, because this is thick with the foam inside, we want to make sure that our binding isn't too thick. It'll be hard to sew if it is. So I did an angled or a diagonal seam. I am not going to show you in this video how to bind your dish mat because it will make this video very long. And in my first dish mat video, I did walk through the different steps to bind it using the sewing machine, also with the glue basting using the Elmer's glue. So if you need help with binding your dish mat, please go back to last month, which would have been January 2025, and find the Quilt-As-You-Go dish mat with the hearts on it, and there I will walk you through how to bind your dish mat. And here is our finished dish mat. Didn't it turn out cute? I think it's just so springy looking. The back looks nice. You know, the stitching is not showing, but it's got a nice texture with our quilting on it. And it's springy. You know, we started off with our plan. And whenever I'm designing any kind of quilt or project like this, you know, I kind of have an idea and I just kind of put it on paper. And as I go, I can tweak it. You know, like we ended up needing these to have more, so I must have had the wrong measurement for the thickness of these here. But it turned out really well. Now, your mat may be different. Remember that. Also, if you wanted to make this all white right here, just put a white piece here and a white piece here. You could have it all white across there, and that would really showcase those shamrocks. Remember, we talked about turning them different directions and having tumbling shamrocks. Changing the width of our strips, that would be fine too. Make this your own. Go ahead and design it and make it your own. I hope you really like this project. I think this Lori Holt fabric looks really good on it as well. And I hope it gives you some ideas. I'd love to see yours if you make some. If you would like to share a picture of yours after you've made it, you can go to Blue Rooster Farm, and in the comments underneath this video tutorial releasing, I usually put in there that this is released. In the comments below, go ahead and put a picture of it. I'd love to see it. That's so fun to see what other people do. So thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Have a great week, and I hope to see you back here soon.